Hello and welcome to Meadow Afternoon. If you're new here, I'm a historical fiction writer and this is a studio video where I chat about the process behind a writing project. Today I'll be talking about my first children's picture book, Your Little Garden. So, what's the book about? The book is about gardens and children. It introduces you to children who play, dream and care for their gardens, which can be anything from a few pots to an entire jungle. The book celebrates our connection with nature and encourages children, and everyone else, to grow and look after plants. It's a collection of illustrations and little stories about different gardens and the children who look after them. The book is a collaboration with Emelina Jones. She's painted beautiful watercolour illustrations and I've written the little rhyming stories. We're currently running a campaign on Kickstarter to fund the printing of the book. The Kickstarter will run until April the 11th, 2019, and there's a link in the description box below if you'd like to check it out and find out more information. Both Emelina and I love gardening, and both of us had gardens as children, so the book was really inspired by those memories, and we wanted to celebrate gardens and also to encourage other children to grow plants wherever they are. For me, there is something magical about growing a garden, planting a seed, watering it carefully and waiting for it to come up through the earth. I remember growing vegetables when I was little and running outside each morning to see how my baby tomatoes were coming along, feeling very proud when the lettuces were big enough to eat, and I always wanted to grow an enormous pumpkin. Capturing that moment of wonder, that moment of daydreaming as a child, that moment of play was something I had in my mind as I wrote the words for this book. Here's a quick example of one of the pages I wrote. This is the first garden you encounter in the book. Just before tea is the time to water, and along comes skipping the gardener's daughter. Her favourite colour is not hard to guess, and she knows that yellow for her is the best. Just organised patches of scented colour, daffodils, tulips, and roses all summer. And high above, watching over it all, the robin sits on the old stone wall. The process for creating the book was a little back to front. Normally with children's books, you write the words and then the illustrator creates the illustrations, but with Your Little Garden, Emelina painted all the paintings first and I created the words afterwards. Because the book doesn't have an overall story plot-based narrative to it, we could work that way round, and we didn't decide to work this way for any reason, it just came about like that. The whole process has taken about 7 months or so to complete this project, and when we started to talk about the book, we discussed all the pages and the different sorts of gardens that we wanted to include. We more or less laid out the whole book in one meeting and wrote down a few keywords for each page. For instance, the first garden in the book, we wanted it to be a very organised garden, lots of flower beds, to feel a little like an English country house garden. So those were some of the keywords we wrote down for that page. We wanted to have lots of variety in the types of gardens, in the plants, in the environments, and in the landscape as well. We didn't go round the world and pinpoint countries, we just wanted enough variety so that a reader, pretty much no matter where they lived, could find a garden that could look like one they could have. And also to have lots of variety so that a reader could explore new types of gardens and plants as well. Once Emelina had completed the main garden images, I sat down to write the words. The first thing I did was to print out little thumbnails of all the paintings. That way I could lay out the book in front of me on the table, which I think if you're working on a project like this, it's really motivating to see the book coming together, especially when you're in the middle of the process. I spent quite a bit of time looking at the paintings and looking at all the details. Emelina incorporates elements of storytelling into her illustrations, so there were lots of little animals and toys in the images. There were lots of little stories already embedded into the picture. At that point, I had to make a decision about the narrative voice I would use. I considered writing in first person, having the children talk directly to the reader. However, I decided quite quickly not to do that, just because I felt that it would make the book very noisy. Every child would have a different voice, a different way of talking. The ages of the children vary, so that would have made a difference to their way of putting things, and it would end up being just too busy, and especially if you're reading the book aloud, I felt it would make each page feel very different from each other, and there'd be no overall unity to the writing, and the story wouldn't flow in quite the way that I wanted. So I went for a third-person narration structure. The next step was to think about what story I wanted to tell. I didn't want to just explain what was in the pictures, but I did want to pick up on some of the storytelling aspects that were already in the images. I thought it would be nice if the words told a bit of the story, and then you could look at the pictures to discover more. There are so many details in these paintings, and that makes them really interesting to look at, and I thought it would be fun to leave things for the reader to discover in the images. I focused the narrative on the children, and I wanted to write about some of the things the pictures didn't tell. Some of the children's thoughts, their dreams, the games they're playing, sometimes a bit about their family or something they're excited about. I really wanted the words to complement the pictures and to add more to the stories that the pictures were already telling. For example, in the page with the little girl and the turtle, she's standing there, the sun is setting, she has a watering can in her hand, she's looking out across the landscape. My focus here was that she was watering the plants just before bedtime and wishing to play outside some more and looking at that moment at the end of the day when a child doesn't want to go to bed. On another page, there's a little boy in a greenhouse, and here I saw him running home every day after school to see how his plants are coming along, being excited about the vegetables that he's growing and spending his free time in the garden. There's another page where there's a little girl standing in the room of her house with pot plants all around her. And I saw her getting ready to have a party with her friends, and she's created a garden inside. I focused mainly on little things that would give the pictures a little bit more backstory. I looked at each image and asked myself a few questions. What is the child doing? What's he or she thinking about? Are they playing a game? Are they daydreaming? If so, what about? Are they helping in the garden or helping harvest with their families? Why is the little girl dressed in yellow boots and a yellow hat? Or what is the boy thinking about as he kneels down by the pond? These questions helped to develop the stories. The words in the book have a rhyme to them. The writing is not poetry or prose, it's a little in between. I kept reading the words aloud as I was writing over and over again to see how the rhythm worked and to hear how they sounded. As children's books in particular are often read aloud, it was important to me that the words read well but also sounded and flowed really well when you read them aloud. One of the areas that had the most editing was the rhythm of the sentences. I wasn't trying to construct stanzas of any sort, but the words needed to have a sense of rhythm to them. A quick example of what I mean is in a line like, "Just before tea is the time to water, and along comes skipping the gardener's daughter." The sentence has a sense of rhythm. However, if I changed it to be, "Just before tea is the time to water, and along comes the gardener's daughter," the rhythm is slightly different, as the second half of the sentence is almost missing a beat. Both versions rhyme and both sound alright, but at least I think it sounds better with that extra beat in there. There were a few rhymes that after looking back at them didn't work so well and they had to be rewritten. I like to leave writing several days at least before rereading it. It makes it easier to see the mistakes if I take a break first. Something I also tried to pay attention to as much as possible was not repeating the same rhyme and not using the same set of rhyming words over and over again. This meant shifting the sentences around quite a bit. Because I was writing about gardens throughout the book, the same words kept cropping up again and again. Plant and plants, for example. Sometimes I knew what I wanted to say, but I almost had to say things back to front in order to get the rhyming words at the end of each line. There were a few words that I wanted to use, but I found it very hard to find a way to rhyme them. Garden, for instance. Garden does have words that rhyme with it, but most of those words didn't fit the story I wanted to tell, so finding the right words took some time on some of the pages. One other thing that I thought about for the book was giving the children names. None of them have names in the finished version. While they don't have names written in the text, I do suspect that Emelina has names for all of them, but in the stories they're not given names. I like that because I think it would be fun for children to give the characters names as they're reading the book. Everyone who reads the book could give the characters names and pick their favourite gardens, and I felt like it was a nice thing to have. There were also little animals in all the paintings, so that could also be a little game for readers to play. Spot all the animals, name the characters, pick your favourite garden. The age group of the readers was something that someone asked me about, and what age group the book is aimed at, and honestly, I never write with an age group in mind. This is a children's book, so I knew I was writing for children, but I didn't purposely write for a certain age group, like 4 to 6 or 10 to 12. The book is definitely a little bit more on the wordy side, so I think it might be a bit hard for very small children to read on their own. I think the book can be read aloud, and then as the child learns more and more words and gets practiced with reading, they can start to read it themselves. It's definitely not a learn how to read book or a child's first reading book. Once the main illustrating and writing was complete, we then moved on to looking at printing and publishing the book. We pitched the idea to a small independent European publisher. Emelina has worked with them before and they loved the project, so we collaborated with them to produce the book. They work a little bit more unusually with their authors, and it's very much a collaboration between us all, and we all bring our own skill sets to the table. We're all involved in every step, in every design decision, the promotion, the whole process of producing the book. They have a wonderful editor and they worked on the layout of the book. The next stage after the book was ready was to build the Kickstarter campaign. That was an intense process. There's a lot of work that goes into a Kickstarter, filming the intro video, writing the text. There's lots of writing needed for the campaign, lots of graphics, designing the reward bundles and stretch goals. It's a lot of fun, and it was something that all of us, including the publisher, was really interested in. It's a new way of producing books, and all of us were excited to try Kickstarter. We see it for books like a pre-order service and a great way for people to directly support the creators and the projects they enjoy. None of us had ever put a campaign on Kickstarter before, so it was a learning process. There's a lot I can talk about here, and I think I'll save the Kickstarter behind the scenes for another project video, otherwise we'll be here for a very long time today. At the time that I'm recording this video, the Kickstarter campaign has a few days left to go, and we've reached the first stretch goal, so that's all really exciting, and I can't wait to see the book printed. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment down below, say hello, or just let me know what your favourite children's book is. I really hope you enjoyed this behind the scenes look at how I approached writing Your Little Garden. Obviously I haven't covered the illustration side of the book because I just worked on the writing, and these are just some thoughts that I had about the project. The creative process is very different for everyone writes in a different way, and this was my process. I hope you enjoyed listening to this video today. If you'd like to find out more about my work, there's a link to my website in the description box below, and you can also find a link to my shop where I sell short stories, prints, and I also post a weekly series over on Instagram. You can find me there at Meadow Afternoon. Have a splendid day, and thank you for watching.